I hope nothing I say offends anybody here tonight. This is something from Nefesh Hachaim I want to share. This is very important about tefillah. The Nefesh Hachaim was written by Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, who was the principal disciple of the Vilna Gaon, who lived about, what year are we holding it? 250 years ago, let's say. So, and Chaim of Volozhin operated predominantly in the 19th century. So he wrote this book, Nefesh Hachaim. I think it's a very fundamental work on Jewish philosophy. But from what I understand of the historical context, this was right at the pinnacle of the burgeoning Hasidic movement. And I hope nothing I say offends anybody here tonight. But there were a lot of controversial ideas that came with this new movement of Chasidism, particularly ideas about God. And so many of which you might call the establishment rabbis, were in opposition to the philosophies of Chasidism, and not just the philosophies, the practices. The practices were very bizarre, and you wouldn't recognize today what was called Chasidism then. It was almost unrecognizable as normative Judaism, right? And that was part of the appeal. It was radically different. People used to do somersaults in Shemona Esrei, and I'm not even exaggerating. Okay, and this is one of the things they write about in the ban. There was a famous ban against Hasidism that was, if you look at what is it, the Declaration of Independence, you have John Hancock's signature is like really big, so that's why your signature is known as a John Hancock. So the Vilna Gaon was asked to put his signature on the ban against the Hasidic movement. He signed it twice. He put his name on 2 times. Okay, and one of the things that they talk about in the ban is how with these wild kind of rituals and davening, jumping and clapping and rolling around the room. They would quote this Gemara that I quoted to you in another class, that Rabbi Akiva would start his Shemona Esrei on one side of the room and he'd end up on another side of the room. So they also try to do that. Questions how. Okay, we're not going to go into it, but let's just say it wasn't normative. Okay, so Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, a lot of what he writes in the book is in response to what he's seeing, trends that he's seeing taking off in the Jewish community that were very alarming. And he said it was all done in the name of what's called deveikus. Deveikus in Hebrew literally means like close connection with Hashem. Attachment to Hashem. Devek in Hebrew is glue, right? Attachment to Hashem, and that's this, that if you can imagine, that's this feeling of like, Hashem, I feel so close to you right now. I'm so uplifted. I'm so inspired, and it's a wonderful thing, and it's great. He says the problem is when you put Deveikus as your number one value, and you throw out everything all the rules and that the Torah gave us, and that comes down to us in halacha, in the name of Deveikus, because the popular philosophy that he said was going around at the time, and I hear it from people today, I hear it from people today. I was at someone's Shabbos table, and he was saying over something from a very prominent, well-respected Hasidic American rabbi, that I bristled, to be quite frank. Because the Nefesh Hachaim speaks directly against this sort of thing. That is, Deveikus is wonderful, it's amazing, but it cannot be at the expense of the guidelines of halacha. We don't dispense, because it feels so I feel so spiritual, I feel so connected, and therefore I have an excuse to throw out all the other stuff. You say, no, you have to keep halacha, and the response is, but it's dry for me, I don't feel, so I can't respond to all that right now, but I want to say something. I'm building up to something that I think is very important. So he says it's one of the problems with this, besides the obvious problem. One of the problem is that it degrades, he says, the Pashuter Yid, he doesn't say Pashuter Yid, but I'm paraphrasing, the plain Jew, that plain Jew who doesn't feel Deveikus. But he goes through his day and he does what the Torah obligates him to do. He gets up in the morning and he davens and he keeps the halacha, and it's dry, but he does it, and he does it with commitment and with consistency, and he's not the most spiritually uplifted guy, but he stays on the straight and narrow path. He says what the Chasidim, he doesn't say Chasidim, he never says Chasidim, but it's understood. He says what these folks do is they say that's worthless. If you don't feel deveikus, what you're doing is like less than nothing, because the important thing is attachment to Hashem. And he says that's such a terrible thing to say and a terrible thing to believe, because a Jew who just keeps his bare obligations, as difficult as it might be, as rigorous as it might be, and he does so on a low, simple level without understanding any high Kabbalistic things, he says that's a very holy person, and that's a very holy thing that he's doing. And how dare anyone degrade such a thing? So I was hearing from someone, he said the name of someone, I'm not going to say who, that I don't accept that this person ever said such a thing. That a person who serves Hashem without deveikus is like a guy who he wants to go to the opera, but he doesn't get around to buying a ticket. So the show is starting and he doesn't have a ticket. So what does he do? He stands outside the theater and he waits for somebody to come out. And he says, "Can I have your ticket stub?" And the guy says, "Sure, I don't need it anymore." He gives him the ticket stub. And then the guy goes home to his hometown where he came from, and he said, I went on a trip to New York. They said, "Did you go to the opera?" Did I say opera? What did I say? Opera, Broadway, whatever it was. "Did you go to the opera?" And he says, "Yeah, I went to the opera. Here's my ticket stub." And he goes and shows everybody the ticket stub. So did he go to the opera? No, he never went to the opera. Does he have the ticket stub that presents as though he went to the opera? He does. So he says, that's the fellow who serves Hashem without deveikus. He's got the ticket stub, but he never really went to the opera. But a Jew who serves Hashem with deveikus, he's at the opera, right? I really bristled when I heard this, I have to tell you. And I don't accept that the person it was said in the name of ever said such a thing. But that's exactly what the Nefesh Hachaim says is one of the crimes of this movement, and should never be said. So what's deveikus and how do we get it? He says, here's how you do it. You do what you're supposed to do. You learn Torah because you're obligated to do so. You daven because you're obligated to do so. He says, and in the course of walking the path, he says, there will be moments of connection. He says, you'll get there. You'll find that connection in there. But the only real genuine connection is on this road. And most of us, he said, are not going to experience it most of the time. But if you keep on this path, there will be those moments, and that is true deveikus. There will be, not every davening is going to be inspired. But if you keep it up, you will have it, and that's your shining moment. You'll get there. But that's genuine deveikus. But the counterfeit deveikus of I'm going to sort of forge my own way and make my own religion because it feels spiritual to me, he says, is completely misguided. So he says this is the meaning of the very famous adage. He says mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, which is usually translated as we begin doing something not for the right reasons, lo lishma, not for its sake, the sake of the act itself. We do it for some external motive, and mitoch that, through that, ba lishma, we come ultimately to do it for its sake. So, but you have to begin the way in. You start with an ulterior motive that's sort of self-serving, but ultimately you do it for the right reason. He says the meaning of that really is most of the time we're going to do things. We're not going to necessarily feel that uplifting spiritual connection. But and that's called shelo lishma. We're doing it sort of not out of deveikus, but we're doing it out of obligation. That's the way he says it. But mitoch that, if you, through doing that process, eventually ba lishma, You will reach deveikus sometimes. But now some of you might think this is a big downer. But I took a lot of encouragement from, because my feeling is, for most of us normal folks, and I'll speak for myself, how often do we, just feel inspired? How often do we just feel lifted up off our feet by mitzvahs and by Torah? Sometimes, but not all the time. So does that mean that we should abandon the pursuit unless that's going to be the experience, that's going to be the result? I think most of us would lose out a lot. I'll speak for myself. It's, it isn't always, head in the clouds. So he says, that's okay. That's exactly what the sages meant when they said, mitoch shelo lishma balishma. You're not different than any person who's ever lived. This is the way we achieve that spiritual connection, is you have to, rev the engine, and eventually you'll be able to just sort of take off. But you got to do what you got to do, and you'll have, if you do that, you'll have these moments. Hashem, I feel so close to you right now.